Hello, good morning and welcome. It's Thursday, May the 15th, and today is all about noises off, distractions, problems for the party leaders. This, the last episode of the week, for this week, is going to be full of grumbles. My name is Sam Coates of Sky News.
And I'm Anne McElvoy from Politico. You don't seem at all grumbly this morning, Sam. In fact, you're as perky as ever at this early hour, which is always bad news for our political overloads. It means stories galore. Here we are with Politics at Sam and Anne's, the podcast that brings you everything you need to know about the day ahead in British politics in 20 minutes. And it is looking jam-packed.
Certainly is. Now, there are some big important affairs of state today. Keir Starmer is off to Albania to talk illegal migration, for example. But really, and this has been true all this week, frankly, the main thing that you end up talking about, the moment that you step foot in Parliament, I've done a fair bit of that this week, is unrest in actually both the two main parties, or what we want to call the main parties, Tories and Labour. And today there are just too many great examples to ignore. Now, on the Labour side, I'm afraid it's a bit of a case of Rachel Reeves being largely in the dock. On the Tory side, well, everyone's just wondering what direction, what on earth direction Kemi Badenoch is taking it all in, and whether even she's behind the steering wheel. So that's the subject, I think, to today, rather than the talking points that Downing Street might have.
And the direction for the Chancellor today is Derby. She is going to be talking to workers at the Rolls-Royce factory there. They got some good news, a bit of a break in that America trade deal on exports. And she will be hoping to emphasise that. Also saying that overall Britain is going to see the proceeds of hard work, the job's not done. Classic Chancellor speak. But really, I think in a defensive mode, Keir Starmer is also going to face MPs on Monday with the Parliamentary Labour Party meeting there after that letter from about 100 MPs fretting about the impacts of planned welfare cuts landed with the chief whip. So it does feel, actually, you say that Chancellor's in the dock, but it feels like both the Chancellor and the PM are feeling the heat at the moment, Sam.
I think that's right. You talked about Rachel Reeves going to Derby for a bit of a victory lap post the UK-US trade deal last week. I had something incredible yesterday, Anne. I was talking to a minister who's sort of one of those responsible for kind of dealing with some of the sectors that are affected by the trade deal and benefit from the trade deal. Did you know that actually the tariffs haven't been reduced as promised last week? Did you know that actually in some of the areas, and I think some of the manufacturing areas, the promises for Donald Trump of a big reduction from 25% tariffs are not in place, and they can't quite work out when they're coming in? One of the bizarre things is that because of the
goodness,
way
the checks in the post.
Well, it is a bit. But nobody's sure who to phone in the Washington administration. Nobody's sure quite how these things are going to come into effect. So this person was saying, I'm getting lots of questions, and I just can't answer them at the moment, and it's very hard to work out what's going on. Anyway, that's a bit of a distraction just prompted by Rachel Reeves' destination today. But to start on the Labour side more politically, what's really unusual about today is that we've got not one, but two sets of comments, direct quotes from people who either do or until very recently did work in Number 10 about the political nightmare that this government is facing. Two great stories, actually. One in the Times and other on the Politics Home website. And in a moment, we'll add some of our own knowledge to that. So that feels like the obvious starting point this morning. Right, let's zoom over to something that's in the Times. A few weeks ago, I picked up genuine shock amongst Labour MPs, particularly sort of pro-growth Labour MPs, that Keir Starmer's head of growth in Number 10, who's a guy called Nick Williams, who's a pretty substantial figure. He was also head of economic policy in opposition, was suddenly no longer in his job. And nobody quite knows why. But what we do know is that he's popped up in today's Times with a big challenge for the Chancellor. He's sort of been saying the most unhopeful things that they do not like people saying out loud. Firstly, he said, and I quote, that current public spending plans are not credible and would have to be reassessed. You know, he's basically saying this government's got to spend more because of the challenges it faces. But that is a direct attack on Rachel Reeves, because the biggest decision she's made this year has been to squeeze spending in order to hit her fiscal rules, which he doesn't think can change. So instead, he says the bottom line is that taxes are going to have to go up. And by the way, go up and go up soon, maybe not even waiting to the autumn budget, but maybe repurpose next month's spending review in order to put them up, because it's just killing everybody to wait for what he thinks is the inevitable tax rise sort of event. He thinks you can see it's coming from space. Rachel Reeves does not want to hear any of that.
For sure, she won't. But I think that quote, the bottom line is that taxes will have to go up. And there are also punchier bits even yet in his account. The path of public spending is just not credible. It sounds like a sort of Tory attack document. It looks to me a bit like Labour's tax bombshell, just delivered by someone who was very senior on the Labour team in opposition and has been a former Treasury official. So it's a real marmalade dropper, that one. And I think that will set the hairs running. And particularly, as you point out, Sam, when he says Rachel Reeves shouldn't even wait till the autumn budget, she should use the spending review to do tax rises. That's a kind of direct challenge we haven't really heard from anyone of substance, isn't it? We've had a lot of people saying, oh, well, is this sustainable? Or should she loosen here a bit fiscally, or perhaps put something off, or all that stuff where you just fiddle around with the levers. What we haven't heard is this absolutely on the nose challenge to her entire policy and to her vision of what the UK economy needs. When you say he's not sure why he's not in the job anymore, I think I'm pretty sure now.
I think that's right. You say we haven't heard it. Oh, we absolutely have heard it, just off the record from Labour MPs.
Well, that's true. On this I mean, we haven't heard it, like this.
Yeah, I mean, it's if you spend time in Parliament, it comes up a lot. It's just now to see this being the substance of on the record conversation from people who were in Number 10 a few weeks ago is a moment. I've got a bit of my own intelligence I just want to inject into all of this. Now, I'm going to give you, it's not really a health warning, but if you ever in politics suggest any kind of difference, even in emphasis, between a prime minister and a chancellor, automatically it's denied. It just always is. It's not that there's no point in going to them, because you have to as a journalist and check what you're told, but automatically this stuff gets denied. So I want you to, if you double check this, it'll be denied. So just accept it. But I'm going to tell you what I have heard from two credible sources about the discussion in government, people who have been correct in the past, and I have enough faith in to put what they're saying in light. And it's a bit suggests the politics of what's going on is different to what I'd assumed. So I am told by two sources that it's Rachel Reeves who is now going around worrying about the politics of the winter fuel cut that she made last year. There's just a vibe in government that she's the one that concerned that they've done too much political damage with her big decision from last year. But Keir Starmer is the one who's absolutely stubborn and holding firm and saying no change. Now, if you remember last week, The Guardian said this, and The Guardian was then shot down very firmly by Number 10. But Wes Streeting, within a few hours on Sky, seemed to be leaving, and Wes Streeting, of course, very close to Rachel Reeves, seemed to be leaving everything a little bit more open. Now, I think The Guardian story was correct. I thought it was the time. I mean, don't ever really criticise Pippa Crerar. She is going to be right. I think that story was right at the time and reflected something. That isn't a prediction of whether or not there will be a change. One of the people I was talking to yesterday says, if you try to soften the winter fuel announcement, you get yourself into a lot of problems. How do you do it? There's no mechanism for maybe raising the threshold. There are no tax devices that you can use to do it. And anyway, it's just such a big wound to Rachel Reeves' political reputation. It's not clear that she would survive that. So they're not sure that it actually happens. But that conversation is happening. And it's also in the context of the disability cuts, where I hear the rebellion at the moment, and of course, by the time we get to a vote, it'll be different. But at the moment, the size of the rebellion is bigger than the majority that the government has. So it's a bit of a wasteland when it comes to economic policy. The disability cuts, of course, driven through by Rachel Reeves were going to be even worse, as Nick Williams says, before there were other areas where growth was upgraded, complete freeze on PIP at one stage. So, but that was in order to raise cash. Now they're causing massive problems for the government as well. It's the stuff we've been talking about for 6 months is all coming home to roost, and it's coming home to roost painfully in how this government's able to maneuver and able to operate at the moment.
You could always take the old advice, couldn't you, if you were Rachel Reeves, who's, as you say, in an incredibly difficult spot here, and everything it seems to now to be coming out publicly that, as you say, sources were talking about off the record, but also that the caliber of people pitching into the argument, I think, has gone up a notch. That would be one difference that I would spot. So the difficulty, I think, that she has in listening to your insights there, Sam, just sort of reminds me of this, that the government is very prickly, isn't it, about the direction that it's taking on the economy and the trade-offs. It's very much this tone of my way or the highway. And sometimes when I say they could just, take the advice and when you're in a hole, you should stop digging, is sometimes you do make concessions under pressure. Certainly Gordon Brown had to do that over the minuscule pensions rise that caused him such difficulty. George Osborne had to do it over welfare. And the problem that I would guess here is that the government is still confused and insecure on its own narrative. We're going to talk about that in a minute. So when there is this challenge and any sense that a concession may be in the air, it sort of gets blown up even beyond its potential seriousness, because you've got both that sense of maybe needing to retreat on winter fuel allowances, like I don't know if it'll happen or not, but it certainly seems to be a lot of pressure in that direction and a bit of tension as you describe. And if you're still not sure underneath it what you really want to say, that I think really hamstrings people to make decisions. And I think that may be the dynamic between number 10 and number 11.
I was talking to somebody in government about the kind of character and personality of both Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer, and they were drawing comparisons between the two of them. You just used the word prickly. The word that this person who saw them up close for a long time and has, and continues to, is peevish. They said that neither character really liked receiving bad or challenging news. By the way, that's their explanation for why they hire the particular brand of people around them that they do, that perhaps don't challenge things enough, and their biggest skill is delivering bad news to people that don't like getting it. But there is that kind of sensitivity around them that I think maybe I certainly hadn't appreciated. I think it's underappreciated in politics that they are these kind of ever so slightly brittle characters that don't like bad news. You can insert the denial from number 10, number 11 here, because they won't like that and they'll deny it. And there we go. Whatever. I kind of believe the account, to be honest. Anyway, let's get on to the second amazing assessment on the record assessment that we've got. Now, this one actually isn't all about Rachel Reeves, making it all Rachel Reeves' fault, although she gets a big dollar to the blame. It actually spreads it far wider. Now, this morning we have Politics Home, the website, to thank for that, which is edited by my old friend from the Times, Francis Elliott. And they have done a great public service by bringing us a pretty full account of what happened at a private meeting with Downing Street and Labour MPs and putting that into the public domain. And before we get any further, there is no challenge from government, because I've checked this morning, there is no challenge from government to the quotes that I'm about to read you. Now, what I'm about to bring you is comments from Claire Reynolds. Claire Reynolds is Keir Starmer's political secretary, so one of the most senior people in number 10. So what she says matters. She happens to be the wife of the business secretary, Johnny Reynolds. Right. And she seems to hold up her hands to number 10 failing in everything. So, first of all, she basically coughs to a lack of vision from Keir Starmer. She says that Labour must be, quote, clearer in what our vision is and whose side we're on. Wow. I mean, did they not know? Secondly, she says that number 10 haven't worked out how to tell stories. She said that MPs were told that we needed to be better at communicating the party's agenda to them, something which has been raised in private in recent weeks. And then she seems to dollop a big bucket of manure on the comms team in number 10. She says, we know we have lessons to learn on the stories that we are telling, on the way that we're telling stories. The comms review in number 10 will help the new media unit find better ways of communicating with voters in a fragmented media landscape. We know we need to communicate our vision and values with EQ. Right. Okay, so we're blaming the messenger. We're blaming the messenger, says the person who maybe should be coming up with the plan. That is going to go down like a bucket of sick.
Blame the messenger, why not? That's probably what the messenger's there for. No, you're absolutely right. I think this is going to be quite internally cause a lot of anxiety and certainly some crossness. And remember, it's only 6 weeks or so, isn't it, since that change in comms that we discussed with Matthew Doyle, long-serving sidesman to Keir Starmer out, James Lyons coming in, old colleague of ours from the lobby via communications at the NHS and TikTok. So a new pedigree, perhaps a bit more of a modern digital storytelling, direction. But this isn't a master's degree media course, is it? I mean, you don't have months to keep on critiquing what you've been doing and suggest that you need more EQ. I mean, I'm not saying Claire Reynolds is wrong about that. I think in fact there's a lot of truth in what she says, but there is always a danger. I mean, one knows it in organizations, the politics, the media, whatever, where you get that internal thing where people go around critiquing what's been happening and explaining what they haven't got, Sam. But really, as you point out, okay, get everyone together and come up with a better way of telling the story rather than keeping telling yourselves that you're not telling the story well. And I think a lot of people, if you like, at the coalface of communications for Number 10 presently, as well as those who've just left, will feel that. The one doubt I would maybe raise about, and it's such an easy thing for Labour people to say, it's a bit of a default setting in communications, is whose side are we on? Which side are you on, as the great Billy Bragg once sang. I mean, but hang on a minute, that was really not the rhetoric when Keir Starmer came into power. It was all about governing for all of the country, whether Labour or not. We've got this big majority. It's not just our old heartland vote and lefties. We're governing for all the country and we're going forward to growth. When you start to go down the track of which side are you on, I think you're into a very different political narrative. So I don't know if Claire Reynolds will take advice from me or not, but that made me sit up, and it's a sort of confusion at the heart of what is the problem that they think they've got.
I think that's absolutely right. These are the conversations, though, that you have when things aren't going well. The what side are you on conversation seems to ebb away when you're high in the polls and things are going well. But I completely agree. Look, it's not just Labour, it's the Tories as well. We got some leaked audio yesterday suggesting that Chris Philp had been criticising Boris Johnson's Brexit deal and suggesting that they were only scrabbling around to work out what to do at the very last minute before Britain left the EU properly at the end of 2020, and that might have made it harder to return people asylum claims, people to other countries. The thing that most struck me about that, Anne, actually was the original comments and the concession, which was very different from what we were told by Chris Philp, who was immigration minister at the time, but also the very, very, very lengthy statement from the Tories, which both said that we did the right thing in 2020 and that the plan was really good in 2020 and that the plans for immigration under the last Tory government didn't go far enough. It felt like Brexit's still a very sensitive subject, but Kemi Badenoch's Tory party just still isn't quite sure what direction it's going in, because that statement, which was more like an essay, just wanted to inhabit all possible points of the political spectrum.
Leaked audio being a bit of a specialism of this podcast, it turns out, via Sam. But it's interesting to hear Chris Philp's argument there, because on Dublin, on the agreement, you could certainly say it wasn't working very well before Brexit. I mean, that is true. And I covered this wretched agreement inside out and where it was really failing the immigration challenge that a lot of countries, and the UK was very sharply feeling as one of the big drivers of Brexit. He then says afterwards, well, if we were still in the Dublin Agreement, we could use that to our advantage. So you can see why there's sensitivity there from Brexiteers even now. I mean, in fact, I think it's a bit of a Schrodinger's cat saga. Both of these stories are true. You could have theoretically used it, but it may still well not have worked. But it is more interesting to me is that response. You could just say that's in the rearview mirror now. We're going forward. We have Brexited. Nobody is really arguing about that, but there's still that sensitivity because this is a team on the Tory side who will have forged in the fire of the Brexit wars, and in a sense they can't leave them behind, even when it might well profit them to move on from it.
I think that kind of uncertainty about direction is the biggest takeaway for Tory MPs. Can I give you one final note for the week before we finish, which is tomorrow is the assisted dying debate. That is back. I am getting warnings from people in government that they now, obviously government's not responsible for the assisted dying bill, but now there is actually a substantial danger that this bill just fails. Because of the nature of the bill, it's a private member's bill, it can only be debated on a Friday. You've got a lot of amendments. The danger is that it times out. There won't be a vote on it this Friday. They're saying they'll be lucky to be a vote on it at any point in June. And we're starting to get to the point where it's not clear that you can get it in this session. And if it doesn't get in this session before the next King's speech, then it falls. Very complex parliamentary procedure, but the bottom line is the chances of this not happening for England and Wales are, via this mechanism, the Kim Leadbeater bill, are going up rapidly.
And my WhatsApps, I'm sure yours too, are full of advocates trying to get attention and get more coverage, push one or two people over the line. But we won't have time to discuss that today. It does leave us on that cliff edge, doesn't it? And we'll be back on Monday with more on that and quite an extraordinary fallout. It was an action-packed episode of the great drama of British politics today, wasn't it?
It certainly was. We'll see you on Monday to see how it shakes down.
Rest up. See you then.
The first 100 days might be over, but President Trump is showing no signs of slowing down.
America will soon be greater than ever before.
So we're continuing to follow every twist and turn of this remarkable presidency.
And trying to make sense of what it all means for the US and for the rest of the world.
So join me, James Matthews.
Me, Malika Kellner.
And me, Mark Stone.
For Sky News Trump 100, wherever you get your podcasts.